Good evening, everybody. It's a little past 6:30. We're going to get started. I want to thank you all for coming out for our first informational meeting as it relates to what we're calling here in Washington Township the P.R.I.D.E schedule. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Joe Bollendorf. I'm the superintendent of schools. And I'm going to kick things off tonight before Mr. Strout gets into the heart of the matter and a presentation as it relates directly to the schedule. Just to give you a little history, I hope that will hopefully give you some perspective as to where we are. This is not a new concept or a new idea in Washington Township. We started actively investigating this type of schedule 7 years ago when I was still principal of this high school. And I want to explain some of the motivating factors behind that because I think they're very critical for folks to understand. I don't know if everybody in here avails themselves on social media. A lot of things, came my way, and I've heard things. I understand how word travels through a community, and I'm really hoping that tonight will answer a lot of your questions and put a lot of what I see as concerns out there to rest, because there's a lot of information out there that's not accurate. The first thing I will tell you is that a smart schedule, which is what this is can be tailor-made to fit whatever district and whatever it is that they want to do. So you may hear things about a smart schedule in another district that may not necessarily apply to another district. And so tonight you're going to hear how it is that we plan to employ what's known as a smart schedule and what we've elected because of our moniker of Township Pride, a Pride schedule. But essentially it's a smart schedule. So years ago, the state started adding more requirements for graduation for our kids. We have been in an 8-period traditional day model for eons. And part of that model includes a lunch. So in essence, kids have available to them, if they take a lunch, and we think it's healthy and important for kids to have a lunch, to 7 classes. They need 120 graduation requirements, which means that in that 8-period day, they can also take a study hall if they choose. If you notice, and if you look at other communities, you'll notice that Washington Township continues to provide a robust elective programming in business, family, consumer science, technology. The list goes on. We used to have a more robust program with regards to vocational education. But many smaller districts, because of the increased requirements that the state placed on us many years ago, saw those programs start to disappear because they weren't large enough, nor did they have enough time in the day for their kids to be able to avail themselves to those programs. So comprehensive high schools started to gear themselves primarily towards college education and college readiness, and therefore grew the county vocational schools. And now we're getting to a place that many of our kids who don't have the opportunity to get into Gloucester County College for vocational education are being tracked elsewhere. So we had to start thinking outside the box as to how we can create a curriculum that would allow our kids to take advantage of more elective programming, make a more robust programming as it relates to our elective programming, of vocational programming, to assist all of our kids. And here's the get for parents when you think about it. As a father of 4, 3 of whom went through college, I can tell you one of the most expensive things that we as parents are faced with are our kids' uncertainty as to what it is that they want to do when they go off to college. And when they change majors and add more credits that they need to graduate or add more years that they need to be there, that's costing you money, or them if they take loans. However you decide to do it as a family. So I think it's a critical investment for a community to provide a robust education in such a way that our students are going to have the opportunity to explore, to avail themselves while in a public setting that your tax dollars are paying for, to hopefully put them in a position that if they choose to go to college, they have a better sense of what it is that they want to do, what it is that they want to major in, and what it is that they stick with. So I think a comprehensive high school in helping our kids has to provide a robust elective program. Here's an example. About 8 or 9 years ago, I'm guessing on the number, the state infused financial literacy as an additional requirement for all New Jersey high school students. Currently, right now, in our schedule, if you're a freshman, You have 6 required classes and 1 elective, but an elective has to be a state-required course in either practical arts or performing arts. You don't get a real choice. It's between one of the two because you have to graduate with 5 credits in performing arts and 5 credits in practical arts. So we have our freshmen take one or the other, and then they get a lunch. In sophomore year, they take 6 classes that they have to take and the other elective, whether it's performing arts or practical arts. They get very limited choice at this particular point in time, and the lunch. So then junior year was the year that they infused the financial literacy. And now our juniors were going to be faced with the same thing where they would have had to take 6 required courses and financial literacy and a lunch. They wouldn't have been able to take a business class. They wouldn't have been able to take an art. They wouldn't have been able to take dance. They wouldn't have been able to fit in music. They wouldn't have been able to do any of those things that they currently can do. So what did we do? We created an online financial literacy course so our kids could take the course in the summer or after school during the year so that that block could remain open so that the kids could avail themselves to other electives. In the interim, we have about, I'm guessing on the numbers, so don't hold me to it, about 25% of our kids currently engaged in taking 8 classes a day, no lunch. No lunch. That's not healthy. It's not good for kids. But our kids are motivated, and they want to take advantage of all that it is that we have to offer. So it became incumbent upon us to start looking and investigating other ways of doing what it is that we do so that we could give kids more opportunity, so we could guarantee that they would have their lunch during the day. And this process started 7 years ago, and over the course of that time, more and more high schools in the South Jersey area have gone to this model. Many of them are very high-performing schools that we like to compare ourselves and compete with regards to testing. Schools like Cherry Hill East and Cherry Hill West, all 4 of the Lenape Regional High School Districts, the Black Horse Pike Regional School Districts, Kingsway, Mainland, who's been doing it longer than anybody in South Jersey, going on 12 or 13 years now. There are stories of some districts that have gone back, but very few. And in those places, from my perspective, it's a lift. There are things that are going to be set upon us as administrators and as teachers and as staff members to make this work. So you got to ask yourself the question, we are going to put something on ourselves that is going to be challenging, that is going to give us an opportunity to be challenged as well as our kids. Life would be easy just skating by, just to stay with the 8 periods and let the kids figure out what they need to do. To go down this road is a significant challenge for the district, a significant challenge for our high school staff, and a significant challenge for all of us. I think our kids are capable. I've seen it in action. We've had the advantage of studying it for 7 years in all of these places, and we've seen mistakes that were made. We have benefited from that information. We've gone on countless site visits with students, with staff members, with counselors, with administrators. We've brought people in to talk. This isn't an overnight decision. This has been long and hard, and I know these folks are going to give you that, but I wanted to give you a little bit of the history and some of the passion behind what you're doing, because the one thing I'll leave you with, and I'll stay here for the night and be around when you start asking questions, nothing more matters to me than doing right by our kids. And I believe that this schedule gives our kids options and benefits like no other. Think about your own schooling. Think about that one hard class you had to take every day, first period, when you were barely awake. And that teacher saw you every day for a year, first period. And you know as well as I do that you were this kind of person, first period, but you were a different kind of person, fourth period. And now all of a sudden, the staff's going to see you at different times of the day all year long. And guess what? You're also going to see your teachers at different times of the day all year long. And if you don't think that that's not going to make a positive difference, then you don't understand smart scheduling and you haven't done the work that we've done. It makes a huge difference. Most of the schools that are doing this are seeing increase in academic performance, increase in their interest level on the part of their kids. Their kids are starting to feel like they're being treated like adults. They don't stress as freshmen when they get their schedule for the first time and they're calling their friends on the phone. Who do you have fourth lunch? I got fifth period lunch. What lunch period do you have? And oh my God, none of my friends have the same lunch period. And that's like seriously traumatic for a ninth grader. Now they can eat with who they want every day. They can seek help from their teachers during the day. Some of our kids who are economically disadvantaged and can't stay around after school have an opportunity to access staff members during the day, like never before. Our times are different, and the demands on our kids are different. And we have to rise to that challenge and be willing to be flexible enough and work together to make a better situation for our kids of today. And that's what I believe that this schedule does with all my heart, or I wouldn't be laboring, doing the work, and figuring out how to make it happen. My life would be a heck of a lot easier just staying the way it is. I'm near the end of my time, all right? But I'm invested in this, and I'm interested in doing this because I think it matters. I think it makes a difference. And I think it's going to make our high school and our community a better place. So with that, I'm going to introduce John Strout, the principal of the high school, who will begin the presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. B. I usually want to go out and tackle someone after I hear Mr. Bollendorf open, so I feel no different tonight, but tackle in a good way. Tackle this challenge that is something that we're all very passionate about. I just want to take a moment before I begin to remind you that if you haven't already, at any point, feel free. We have lots of copies of this presentation if you want to take notes. We also have Mr. Lindstedt, our audiovisual coordinator extraordinaire, is videoing this. We'll be working to create a page within the high school page where we'll have a warehouse of documents and videos so that we can memorialize and make sure that all of your questions are answered. Before I introduce members of our panel, I also have Mrs. Saponara. She's the real MVP of the school. I asked her to take notes and Q&A so that they could be posted in that spot on the website. In the back, a couple people not planning to present tonight, but our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Jack McGee, our Director of Secondary Education, Dr. Steve Greger, and up here in the front, you'll hear from all of us, Mr. John Savarese, 1112, Executive Assistant Principal, Mr. Guyberson, who is not only a math teacher leader and one of our senior class advisors, but was also chief negotiator on the WTEA as part of union negotiations and contract settlement, along with Mrs. Soukalis, also a math teacher. We went for the math minds, right? Also a teacher leader and a member of the negotiating team for contract. Mrs. Karen Carpenter, who, whether she likes it or not, I'm going to make sure everyone knows, is our Educational Services Professional of the Year for the district, so I think we can give her a sidebar special round of applause. Mrs. Carpenter also, in addition to being a school counselor, also plays a critical role in all of this because she is one of the key people, the key person, quite frankly, in helping us to build the master schedule. So she plays a critical role in that. And will help with that this summer. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Steve Selby, our 910 Executive Assistant Principal. So I'm going to ask you to hold your questions until the end. If you need to go to the bathroom, out these doors around the side, if you're not kind of diagonal there, if you're not familiar with the core area, there are restrooms there. They're unlocked for you. I'm going to ask you to hold your questions until the end. We'll stay all night and answer questions as long as we have to. I know you'll have some good ones, and hopefully we'll have some good dialogue and answer those questions throughout the presentation. Any left unanswered, we'll answer at the end. So Mr. Bollendorf mentioned this when we got into this. He says 7 years ago, we really had a lot of committees. We had, I would say, 50-plus teachers that made visits to various schools. And then from there, when we started several years ago, subcommittees that made recommendations. Everything from marketing it to academic committees that have played a role in making recommendations for policy revisions. But in any event, this was what that group decided to come up with as a moniker because it makes a lot of sense. This schedule will play a role in helping us to better than we are right now in our current schedule, prepare responsible, independent, diverse, exceptional students. And I think that and hope that you'll see some of that come to life tonight. So, not to get too educational jargony, right? But I know that a lot of times when we hear something new, we go to the first thing that we hear. And so while we live in the world of scheduling, I was the guidance director for 6 years, and along with people like Mrs. Carpenter. Scheduling was a huge part of my job. So I talk in a way about scheduling that the layperson may not. So I want to make sure that we're clear that it's not a block schedule. Okay, so right now we have a straight 8. Right? 8, well, we have homeroom, and then 8 straight periods. They're all the exact same amount of time, 45 minutes, and the day ends, and they always go in the straight same order. Well, block scheduling would be like 4 periods for half the year for double the time. Right? GCIT, I believe, employs a block scheduling model. So you might have English for semester 1 for 90 minutes, and then you might have in semester 2, not that English would be your only class, but you'd have 4 for 90 instead of 8 for 45. Right? That's what block scheduling is. What we're going to is not a block schedule. It's a 4-day rotating cycle. So after day 4, you go back to day 1, and I'll show you some visuals in a few minutes. And it follows predictable patterns. But it does change. Day 1 is very different from day 2 and 3 and 4. But day 1 is always the same as day 1. All right? And I think you'll see some of that come to light. So students will have 8 classes. 3 will meet in the morning. 1 will not. 4 total. 3 out of 4 will meet. And 3 out of 4 will meet in the afternoon. And in a second, you'll see how school and the academic instructional periods stop during that township time, as we've called it, or that unit lunch. And you'll see some of that as we move forward. So I apologize for the white, I'll clarify that. But the purpose of this schedule, this visual, is to show you a couple of things, all right? We have some predictable trends, right? The day in the cycle defines the class that starts the day. What do I mean by that? Day 1 always starts with class 1. Day 2 always starts with class 2. Day 3 always starts with class 3. And day 4 always starts with class 4. Quite frankly, it wasn't that long ago where we were calling it A day, B day, C day, D day. But through our continued discussions with other schools, there was some really good logic around, well, you should make day 1 whatever class 1. And day 2, class 2. So that is just one example of something that might seem small, but has gone a long way in some of our schools and exemplars that we've studied and stay in constant contact with. So another predictable trend, a fact, is if you add 4 to the day in the cycle, that's a reminder of the first class to meet after township time, after that 56-minute unit lunch. So day 1, afternoon starts with 5. Day 2, afternoon starts with 6. Day 3 starts with 7, and day 4 starts with 8. Okay? And another thing that's an easy thing to remember as a trend or a fact or a predictable aspect of the schedule is whatever class happens first, both in the AM wheel and in the PM wheel, is the class that does not meet that next day. So on day 1, class 1 and class 5 on the next day, those are the 2 that would drop, 1 and 5. All right, not sure if you can see that there, but that's another trend, right? And same with the 4th period. This part's really important because if we get these words mixed up and these concepts mixed up, we'll be really confused. There are classes and there are periods, right? Every student will have 8 classes. Now, in a minute, you'll see as I get later on the presentation, how seniors and freshmen will have study halls, but they'll fill a spot. All right, but every student will have 8 classes in their schedule. There will be 6 periods. Periods are periods of time. Classes are meeting patterns. A class is English, a class is math, a class is phys ed. All right, so I wanted to clarify that part. And so each morning during period 1, which will occur from 7:20 until 8:22, that will be a 62-minute period. One class will meet on day 1. I might have English on day 1 for that 62 minutes, and math on day 2 for that 62 minutes, and science on day 3. The reason there's 62 minutes in that first period of time is to allow additional 5 minutes for morning announcements. Our telecommunications program, if you haven't seen it, they do an amazing show that will continue next year. We have to work out some of those details, but it will be a 5-minute period added to the beginning of each day. Every other period, 2, 3 a.m., 4, 5, 6 in the p.m., will be 57 minutes long. Those are the instructional periods. So Mr. Bollendorf mentioned, yes, there are other schools that are doing this. And if you talk to the staff there and you talk to the students, you know, those that are recent in going to it and have a frame of reference, right, from what it used to be like, I think a very strong majority would say there's no way we could ever go back. I'm aware of Deptford, I believe, is the only school I'm aware of that went to the schedule for about 4 years and then transitioned back. I've had conversations with their principal why, and his main thing is the schedule's amazing, and it works in some places. It just, for a variety of reasons, didn't work for us. We visited these schools. In fact, there are schools up here that are not, or schools that are not up here. We went as far south in Maryland to a school also somewhat similar to us in terms of size, James Hubert Blake, several years back, and got to see their schedule in action. Teachers were present for that. Patty, I think you might have been on that one. Yeah, so we've made trips, and in some cases, we've been to Kingsway multiple times. We've been to Cherokee, as an example, multiple times. I joke with Teresa that I'm not going to let the Cherokee principal steal her from me because we are in constant communication, and I know that she already realizes how great Teresa is. But the point here is we have a lot of our colleagues and schools somewhat similar to us, both in size and in geographic location, that are finding great success with this. And as Mr. B said, many of these, they do something different. So for example, in the Cherry Hill School District, they are incredibly regimented during their unit lunch. So I think theirs is 50 minutes. Kids have to sit in a homeroom for the first 25, and then they go to lunch, half the school, say grades 9 and 11. The other half the school goes to lunch and then sit in the homeroom or sit in the study hall. So that's what they've decided will work for them. Kingsway does something different with their allowances during that unit lunch, and we'll talk a little bit more about our plans as we move forward. All right, at this time, I'm going to turn it over as we move through this to Patty Soukalis, one of our math teachers, who will continue for us.
All right, good evening, everyone. As Mr. Strauss said, my name is Patty Soukalis. I have been a math teacher here for 20 years, so I'm getting kind of old. And I got the pleasure of the slide of why. You know, the schedule we have works. Why are we going to change it? You know, if it's not broken, why are we going to fix it? I will tell you that I have seen many educational changes through my entire career, whether it be curricular, whether it be behavior, procedures, things like that. There is nothing I have implemented in the past 20 years that I have been more excited about than changing this schedule for next year. I have been a part of this, as Mr. Strout said, for the past 7 years. I've gone to Maryland to see it. I went to Cherokee this past spring to see it. It is amazing, and it's funny, when we went to Maryland, they had been in that schedule for 14 years, and the kids down there actually commented to me, which will resonate with me, what do you mean your kids are scheduled for a lunch? What do you mean they have to go to a certain cafeteria? They found that concept so foreign that it was amazing to think, like, wow, that is, you know, kind of an odd concept. And as Mr. Bollendorf stated earlier, let's be honest, when your kids get their schedule in the summer, what is the first period that they look at? They look at their lunch period. Who's in their lunch? Who are they going to sit with at lunch? It's the most stressful thing for their day, and we're taking that stress and allowing them to go and eat where they want, with who they want, and who they're comfortable with. I think it's awesome. I have a daughter that's in 6th grade. I'm excited that in a few years she'll be up here and be a part of it. So I'm not only looking at it as an educator, I'm looking at it from your eyes as a parent. I think it's going to be amazing. So some of the things that we have up here is it's going to increase instructional time. You may ask, where did the 4,500 instructional minutes come from for a typical student? Well, that's where Mr. Bollendorf alluded to the fact that right now, most students will take 7 classes and a lunch. By adding that 8th class in there and still allowing for the lunch is where you're going to get those extra minutes. So it's great for them because they can take more electives. As someone that teaches seniors, I teach college level statistics. Some of my students, you know, they can't take other classes because they want to take mine, which is going to be a great opportunity for them. There's going to be deeper learning, 12 minutes added instructional to periods. I will tell you again, I have taught everything from pre-algebra back in the day. I've taught college level statistics as I do now. I've also taught in the resource room. I've taught in-class support, regular education. There's never enough time. So as we go through this, you always get, you know, you start to explain, you go over things, you're in the middle of explaining something to a class, and boom, the bell rings, now they have to go. Adding that 12 minutes, is going to be amazing. And when you say, oh, well, you know, you're going to lose a class period a day, but you know what? We lose 5 minutes getting them settled, and then the last couple minutes of class, you know, they're all packed and ready to go to their next class. So by eliminating that and only meeting 3 out of the 4 days, you're going to actually gain time by doing things like that and keeping them consistent through the period. Again, every student will have a lunch period during the day. I see all too often, teaching a senior elective, students that are eating lunch in my class while trying to do very complicated statistical problems. That's an issue. These kids need a mental break, and that's what this block is going to give them. It's also going to provide great flexibility for their requests. One of the major issues, I teach math, my husband actually also teaches here, he teaches science, and there are some students that can't take multiple labs, and we'll talk about that and how this is going to give them a great opportunity to open up to other classes that they'll be able to take. Opportunities for tutoring academic interventions into the school day. Again, I can speak from this firsthand being a senior teacher. They have sports, they have activities, they have jobs. It's very difficult to get my students after school. There are many days that they come in during my prep period, they come in during my lunch period to make up work, and these kids don't get a break. Whereas now, they'll be able to come see me during the lunch period and we'll all be off common together. You know, sometimes we don't have off periods together as well. So this will be awesome. As a math teacher, I am extremely excited to be able to get them during the day instead of trying to find them some point after school and begging them to stay. And again, you know, when we say in here, improved overall school culture and climate for students and staff, and improved attendance from students and staff, you may say, how are you going to know? Well, we know because we've talked to other schools. We've talked to the kids. I've been in the lunch periods with them. I've talked to the staff. And everybody I've talked to has a great attitude about it. The kids, the staff, the administration, they're all on board. They say it's great, and they're sorry they didn't go to it sooner. Okay, so now the big question is, what is lunch going to look like? You know, we have all these kids in the school. How are we ever going to feed all these students? How are we going to do it? Well, one of the visitations that Mr. Giberson and I went on in the spring was to Cherokee. Cherokee is relatively the same size as we are. They have multiple cafeterias like we do. And what I'm going to show you on the next slide is a clip from Cherokee of what their lunch looks like. This is a video that they created. Obviously, we can't do that at this point because we haven't run it yet, but this will give you an idea of what it looks like and be able to hear some verbatim from students from Cherokee.
Lunch and Learn is new, but it's a lot of fun and it gives a lot of opportunities for kids to do like what they want with their time. I do a lot of my homework and I study a lot during Lunch and Learn, and I can also socialize with a lot of different groups of friends.
Lunch and Learn gives the opportunity for teachers to meet with students and students to meet with teachers if they're struggling or if they have to make up stuff when they're absent.
It's a nice break in between classes and you can just like do all your homework and you have enough time to do everything.
During Lunch and Learn, I sometimes go meet with different clubs, like French Club meets during Lunch and Learn sometimes, which is like all different clubs, or like I go to meet teachers if I need extra help or just make up a task if I miss a day of school. So really you can do like anything during Lunch and Learn.
It's been good for them to have some social interaction time with friends. I think this year being on duty, it's the first time I've seen a lot of them not use their cell phones. They're just talking to each other, which is good to see.
It's a nice experience. It's nice to like mingle and meet other people from around the student body.
It's a great break from how the schedule has been. It gives us more time to interact with some kids that we might not necessarily get a chance to work with during the day.
Kids who are in sports, have work after school, get to be involved.
It's a really, really nice way for them to get to their teachers when otherwise they would have to only do it at 2:30.
I really like Lunch and Learn because you get to sit with all of your friends, you're all together at the same time, and then you can do your homework from the day before or homework that's due the next day while you're still eating your lunch.
I definitely have more time to go to like club meetings and do my homework and things, so before I'd have to stay after, and it's just more convenient this way.
In middle school, we'd just eat lunch in like a quick 20 minutes and then go outside. While here, it's like you get to choose what you want to do with your time, whether it's eating lunch or like doing your homework and catching up on schoolwork.
You can actually go places now. You can go outside. You can go to different classrooms. It's really amazing, and I really like it.
If you're stressed for the day, it helps to make you feel better and also gives you time to study so that you can just get a clear mind and do well on tests coming up.
This year's schedule definitely gives us a lot more freedom. I mean, you have to kind of make the best use of your time between eating, studying, going to clubs, getting extra help, and then like just socializing with your friends. And I think it really has like made students more independent with their time.
Students who maybe have questions or something, they know that they can always access their teachers during lunch and learn, so I think it gives them an opportunity of, my teacher is always available, I just need to schedule it with them. And I think as a student, I would really benefit from that, and I see the students benefiting from that regularly.
Lunch and Learn has given us a lot of flexibility in what we're able to do to meet with students who want to come in and study, go over questions, problems, whatever it might be, when they might not ordinarily be able to come in before school or after school.
Students have a lot of activities, they have jobs, their commitments. You know, late buses don't run every day, so now you have this opportunity within the school day when you're already here to be able to find a teacher, work with them. So it provides that extra opportunity to reach students and help them in ways that weren't necessarily available before.
Up next, we're going to have Mr. Savarese is going to come up and speak.
Thank you, Mr. Collis. That was a great video. Hopefully it did give you a little visual of what we're talking about here. Hopefully it does put you at ease a little bit. I also am a parent. My daughter's in 11th grade, rising senior, so I'm in the same shoes as you. But I really truly believe, as well as the rest of this panel, that this is a truly great thing for kids, as Mr. Bollendorf said, and I really can't wait to get this started. Some of the things I'm in charge with is the how. We're going to have some ongoing professional development for teachers, some anticipated hiring of staff. Rumors were out there that we may be reducing staff. That is incorrect. We might be actually hiring positions, support staff. No one's losing their jobs here. It's not about that. We're going during this Township P.R.I.D.E lunch. We're going to be in strategic places. Your children will be safe. We have a number of staff that will be visible throughout the building in all of our eateries and different locations that we have. We will have additional 4 new service locations around the school. In addition to 5 new eating locations, I believe one of the slides later will address that as well. And we had the budgets for some furniture, trash cans, wipes, etc. like that. No, your children will not be cleaning up the cafeterias or the tables, but we will have wipes and stuff like that to disinfect. And they could, will be expected hopefully to maybe, clean up if there's a spill or something like that. But we'll have our custodians and stuff like that that will be available and take care of all the other things that go along with lunch. Anticipated challenges. We all know change. That's why we're here. I think the people are afraid sometimes, but we could either embrace change or resist it. We're going to choose to embrace it and move forward. Some of the anticipated challenges are reduction in lab sciences. However, when you have a lab, if we have a day off, let's say it falls on a Wednesday, the science labs don't meet, so they have to meet the following week, so they miss a whole lab. In this schedule, if we have a day off for whatever reason, we go with the next anticipated day. Okay, so if day 1 falls on a Tuesday and we're off on Wednesday, day 2 is now on Thursday. Does everybody understand that? So you can have that lab. Those labs are not missed. Classes do meet 3 out of 4 days. One of the other problems is there's no dedicated homeroom period. However, it changes with the day. Okay, each day, day 1, class 1, day 2, class 2, etc. What about the late openings? Okay, we believe in this schedule so much that we want to keep intact that 56-minute lunch period, and the instructional periods will be 37 minutes and 42 minutes for first period. That includes the homeroom. And the school day will end at 2:19. That's for delayed openings. As you can see, the early dismissals, again, valuing the unit lunch period with the instructional periods 34 minutes, 38 for first period. That's the homeroom. And the school day will end at 12 o'clock. So we do value this lunch so much that we're going to keep that intact and have these classes. Right now, we only get probably 20 minutes in a half day. So between the passing time and getting in the class, there's really some lost instructional time. So this will improve that. Courses. I know a lot of people are, and looking at courses and stuff like that. So incoming freshmen coming in are expected to take select 7 classes and a study hall. However, you can request an 8th period class if you'd like, if an incoming freshman. That's kind of pretty much what we have in our process as right now. We can request that process. Rising sophomores and juniors are expected to take the 8 classes, again, with that unit lunch. Our rising seniors are expected to select anywhere between 6 and 8 classes. Rising seniors will be permitted to select a maximum of 2 study halls and will therefore be scheduled for 30 credits. We are anticipating board approval on credits for, they're listed up here, rising seniors 120, rising juniors 120, and the sophomores and freshmen 130 credits to graduate, minimum requirements. Again, we are really excited about the schedule. We think, you know, it does bring some challenges, but we will work through everything, and I truly believe that this schedule is going to benefit all the children as well as the teachers. I'd like to turn this over to Mrs. Carpenter to continue the presentation. Thank you.
Good evening. I've also been on this committee from the very beginning, and as a 36-year educator, yes, I'm older and seasoned, I like to think of it, and as a school counselor, I have also had the opportunity to visit, I visited Kingsway, and one thing I want to assure all of you as parents, I had 6 children, 5 of who went through Washington Township, and I've discussed this with my own children even though they're out, and they've made comments that they would have liked this schedule when I give them the nuts and bolts of it. One thing I have to say that struck me when I visited Kingsway, I focused on the student. I asked the students what they thought, and I had no idea what grade I was speaking to. I asked them what grade. The freshmen who, I don't know if any of you were freshman parents, loved it. They loved everything about it. They loved the freedom. And that, by the way, parents, is the #1 thing that our freshmen say when we ask them, what do you like about Washington Township High School? The freedom. And #2, the large size of the building. Probably everything you might not like. But they spoke to one another. They communicated. As a school counselor, I find one of the benefits is socially and emotionally, it's their chill period during that Township Pride lunch. I think our kids need that. As your youngsters go through, I think it's really important, especially for our incoming freshmen. I would encourage them to take advantage to schedule that study hall. I think they need that downtime in addition to the Township Pride lunch. As you can see, Day 1, and this is the wheel that we'll be using, begins with Class 1 on the AM wheel. On the PM wheel, it would begin with Class 5. Day 2, Class 2 on the AM wheel, and the PM wheel is Class 6. Day 3, Class 3. Afternoon would be Class 7. Day 4, Class 4 in the morning, and then the PM wheel would begin with Class 8. As Mr. Sav said, in the event of an emergency closing, the next school day would be the next numbered day in the cycle, and it does allow continuity. As Mr. Stroud pointed out, I am the person that does the master schedule. My watch was telling me to breathe as he was doing the introduction. It is a large undertaking. And one of the benefits for the lab sciences I can attest to is the fact that in the past I did not schedule labs on Mondays and Fridays due to the fact that we missed many Mondays and Fridays due to holidays. So this model does prevent that because it is an ongoing, or it rotates each day. Science labs, and this is another thing I'm looking forward to on the scheduling end of it, are not linked to health and phys ed classes. And so I hand-did the schedules for science. It took me many hours and sleepless nights in the summer, and they are linked. They were linked to the phys ed. That no longer will be the case. Your child will receive 5 credits for health and phys ed. When a lab science class meets on the AM wheel, during third period, and you can see that the time is earlier, 9:27 to 10:24. Students will remain in that class until 10:44. That's an additional 20 minutes into the unit lunch, and that will be the lab that they will get 6 credits for. If the lab science meets during the PM wheel, during fourth period, which is 11:20 to 12:17, the students will report to the class at 11 o'clock, and that will be 20 minutes early before the end of the unit lunch, okay? So it will also it'll be a little easier for the students to take 2 sciences, because if any of your children had conflicts, you know that often that was a conflict in the schedule. Here would be a sample schedule for a freshman, and as you can see, starting with day 1, the times are all posted. Those extra minutes are built into period 1. If you note on the schedule, if you go to day 2, the lab is in blue, okay, and you can see that it bumps into bumps back into the lunch, I should say. Please also note that there is a study hall in for this particular schedule because it is a freshman, okay? And again, we are scheduling freshmen. One thing I wanted to add, because we are starting scheduling February 6th, have your children start thinking about what they're going to take, and our freshmen, we always ask them for 3 electives, so do think about that, and because it's coming up very rapidly. This is a sophomore-junior schedule, and again, you can see that the lab science is on day 1, and it goes into the township time lunch period, so, and then the next day, we are on day 2, so there would not be a lab. It probably, as adults, and you can see on the schedule on the bottom, I know it might be a little difficult to see, but you can see also that on day 1, periods 4 and 8 are dropped. On day 2, periods 1 and 5. On day 3 would be periods 2 and 6, and then day 4 would be periods 3 and 7. So you can, or I'm sorry, class, see, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, okay? So I apologize for that. Mr. Strout, thank you. It's classes. So that'll be an adjustment for me. I do apologize for that. Okay. Mr. Strout, take over.
Thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. I do it all the time where I say periods and I mean class, and that's where some of these, what otherwise might be subtleties are important for the purpose of clarification. I just wanted to back up. There's one point that I think is certainly worth mentioning. Mrs. Carpenter talked about how we've purposely, for several years, eliminated labs whenever we can and whenever possible on Mondays and Fridays because those are more common days off. One of the things that will happen in this new schedule is even though there will be a reduction of approximately, on average, 6 minutes per day in science, there will be more lab meeting patterns, okay? Because if you look at a cycle for a school year, there's approximately 36 weeks, 37 weeks, which means there's 36 or 37 lab meetings, which right now our lab is double, 45, 45. You come out of phys ed, right? In the new schedule, because it's 4-day cycles, if you take 180 and divide it by 4, there will actually be 45 anticipated, potentially 45 lab meetings. So we'd actually be 9 more labs. That's one of the significant benefits that other schools and their science teachers specifically have talked about, that even though they've lost some instructional time when you factor the day-to-day, having those 9 additional lab periods, even though it's not 90 minutes, at 77, has been significant in their instruction. So I just wanted to point that out because it was worth sharing. All right, so this is one of the big questions, and so I wanted to make sure that I shared this for parents that may be here with juniors, rising seniors, but also for those of you that are here and your kids will be seniors someday, right? I think it's important to note, if we rewind about 5 years, right? I'll go back to my time as the guidance director. I started here in November 2010. And up until about 2014-ish, there was senior privilege, and it existed like this. During the second semester, if you had a course that you didn't need, meaning you crossed your fingers because every senior needs phys ed and every senior needs English, at the minimum. Some need, an additional third year of math because they failed a year or they have other requirements they have to meet, but at minimum, every senior needs English and health and phys ed. If you didn't have one of those courses during 8th period, second semester you could leave early if you dropped that course. And so Mr. Bollendorf and I made the recommendation to him probably in the 14-15 school year because we had students, underclassmen, freshmen, sophomores, and juniors that were requesting an 8th class because they were driven and wanted to be academically challenged and were willing to forego a lunch. They were getting shut out a lot of these electives that seniors were taking, hoping would fall into 8th period and then would drop right before the second semester so that they could leave early. We began about 5 years ago, giving seniors the opportunity, if they were in good standing, to request an 8th period study hall, right? And some were lucky enough to get a 7th period lunch. And so we have allowed those students with parent permission slip and all those things intact to leave early. So wasn't this time 5 years ago, our seniors were all here until 8th period, and that's when we had classes. When I started here, our graduating class was over 700. So I just want to point that out because it wasn't that long ago when all of our seniors were here until 2:10, until the second semester at the very least. All right, so what privileges will our seniors get, right? Because that's all the seniors care about. You're taking my senior privilege. What's interesting is many of our seniors, and for those parents, if there are any parents that are seniors here, because you have younger kids most likely, a lot of the kids, they have after-school activities, and so they leave, which is nice, and they may go home, and if they have a double period out because they have 7th period lunch, they may go home and catch a nap and grab something to eat, but many of them are coming right back. We will be allowing, for the first time next year, which we have not yet done, our seniors to come in late. All right, now why is that a benefit? Well, ask a 17-year-old kid why that's a benefit once they understand the concept. If we could have our way, a lot of the brain research says that, and this is probably not new to any of you in here, that school should be starting later. In fact, in New Jersey, there are some school districts piloting it. And in California, a mandate has been created that I believe within 2 school years, high school cannot start. Public high school cannot start before 8 o'clock. The point is, wherever we sit on that argument or whatever we may believe in, I'm sharing this because our seniors, while their senior privilege will look a little different next year, they'll actually have more options than what our current seniors have. So if a student is in a good enough standing academically and they're permitted to take the 2 study halls, as best as it is possible to build that schedule for them, they'll be allowed to take any of a combination of an AM study hall and a PM study hall, 2 AM study halls, 2 PM study halls, and you'll see in a second what those effects will do in terms of senior privilege. Before I show the visual of those schedules, I want to also talk about option 2. All right, I want to give you a second to actually read that slide. So I'm giving you 5 examples where through either a program requirement, such as is the case in our business co-op, or through a special education program or a specific application where students could get out in the AM wheel and could be here until 11:20, which would be a 4-hour day, and could be permitted to leave. A perfect example is a student that may want to get involved in a certification program to become HVAC certified, right? Mr. Bollendorf talked earlier about the critical nature of us giving our kids opportunities to explore. Well, we can't give them within our facility the ability to get an HVAC certification, but if that's something that a student wants to pursue and they're enrolled in a program and we can help them with that, then we would be able to put them in a position to not only earn credit for that, but to leave early, right? But what we're not suggesting, right, And the funny thing is, kids that want to rush out of here, they're the ones, some of the ones, John, you'll attest to this, and I know you guys teaching upper grade level kids, and they're the ones that are in a hurry to get out of here are the ones that are crying hardest at the end when they graduate, saying, I don't want to leave, right? So this is an important opportunity for us to be able to provide the balance for the kids that will get involved in something or may choose to get involved, whether it's college credit courses, internships through our academies, or certification programs. If you have a junior, they're going to see a survey coming from me, and I'll make announcements, and I'll leave it open for about a week or two to gauge interest in a presentation where we're going to bring Camden County in to talk about what that might look like and the various certification programs that they can offer for our kids, pastry, cosmetology, other areas that seniors may want to avail themselves to. So encourage your junior to read my email if I send it. When I send it, I should say. Okay, here's an example of a student that, senior that might pick 2 study halls, all right? Now, logically, right, seniors are going to want to, they're going to say, well, I want to be able to get out as early as possible. Because of the rotating nature of the schedule, they're not going to be able to get out early every day. But a senior who has 2 study halls, if those study halls are scheduled for periods 7 and 8, would be able to leave at 1:18, one day out of the 4, and at 12:17, one day out of the 4. The other 2 days, they would not be able to leave early. We'll let them leave, but they'd be here until 2:19. Now, this is an important part, and I had a conversation with one of our parents. I had said, well, we have the ability, and we do on some level, to massage the schedule, because we might suggest that it's not ideal because of the way that this falls, right, to have 56 minutes, then 57, then 57. That's 2 hours and 57 minutes of what we could consider downtime. But let me tell you why that's likely to happen, or why there might be benefit to that. Any of you have kids that get involved in study groups with their peers? They meet, they study, they prepare together, especially we have certain things that are called singleton courses, right? A singleton course only meets one time. An example of a singleton would be some of our specialized career and tech ed courses might run as a singleton, right, because of the number of student requests. Construction technology, for example. Well, when we build the master schedule, and Karen, Mrs. Carpenter does her magic, and Mrs. Marguglio, who helps with data entry, and we use PowerSchool to help us create the best schedule to maximize student requests. If it's determined that, for example, construction tech is class 1, that's when it's going to fall, well then our seniors may have to make a very difficult decision, right? AP Physics C would be another example of a singleton. Calculus BC, right? If we have 20 kids that request that course, and it's decided that that course is going to run class 1, well then a student that wants Calc BC is not going to be able to take a double, a double AM study hall. They may have to make some of those decisions. All right, so I wanted to point that out. 2 AM study halls. If a student takes 2 AM study halls, they'd be permitted to come in at 8:20 in time for second period one day of the week, and actually start at 9:20 once out of every 4 days. I shouldn't say days of the week, once out of every 4 days. So I would ask you to ask your seniors if they like the idea of staying at 9:20 or starting at 9:20. And I could get into procedurally, and I know Mr. Selby's going to handle some of the security and that stuff in a few slides. But so what does that look like? Do they just walk into the school and there's no homeroom? And how do they get? Well, no, we have procedures in place for where they can come in if they're permitted a late arrival. And all of these things, consistent with what we do now with senior privilege, would require, before they could take advantage, parent approval. We have permission slips for that so that you're aware. And here's an example of a student who may have 1 in the AM and 1 in the PM, whereas one of those 4 days they could come in about an hour late, and one of those 4 days they could leave about an hour early. All right, this time I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Giberson, who's going to take us through a couple more pieces of critical information.
Thank you, Mr. Strout. First, I want to go over a couple of things that I really love about it. I have been on the scheduling committee as well for 7 years. I had the pleasure of visiting Kingsway as well as Cherokee. The first thing that comes to mind, last year I had seniors first period. And if the child came in late, they always miss first period. This way, with the rotating schedule, they will not miss first period every single day because it's rotated throughout. So if a child has particular problems getting to school on time, that is a benefit. They're not missing the same class all the time. The second thing, when I talk to students at the 2 schools that I visited, the one thing that they said is, school's stressful. I get anxious. We have so many tests, so many quizzes, so much to study for, so much homework. And it gives me time to decompress and time to get my homework done. So those were the 2 things that I really love about the schedule. I'm going to talk about science labs briefly. Mr. Strout and Mrs. Carpenter already talked about it in detail. But I have a brother that's a science teacher, and he has taught traditional, he has taught the block scheduling and the rotating schedule. He taught AP Physics C, and he said that he loved this schedule because having the longer time, he's able to do more demonstrations for the kids and ask for their feedback on what happened and what occurred. Furthermore, his boss came to him and said to the entire department, you have to create 8 new labs. I'm not sure why it wasn't 9, because the math says that it would be 9 more labs, given that there's 36 lab periods in the current schedule that's feasible. That is if we meet every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday out of the year. But with the rotating wheel, there's a potential of 45 labs, which is more labs. So all the science teachers had to get back into their lab books and figure out what's going to be the more creative labs that they wanted to add to their curriculum. Where will food be served? Food will be served in cafeterias A, B, C, and D, the auxiliary gym, the core lobby, the IMC, and B20. B20 is a classroom, it's now an office, that has a walkthrough capability, and it has the necessary features for them to be able to serve lunch. In cafeterias B, C, and D, there will be study halls there prior to the unit lunch and after the unit lunch. And they're going to open those cafeterias a little bit early and stay open a little bit late in order to decrease the volume and also allow the kids, if they want to go to tutor time for both times, with the teachers for office hours. So this way they can eat during their study hall and go visit their teachers for the extra help that they would want to do or makeup work. Where will they be able to eat? They'll be able to eat, obviously, in the 4 cafeterias. The auxiliary gym, there's going to be high tops with no chairs in there, so they could be easily removed and converted for the gym classes. The 9-10 gym, in the bleachers behind the backboards only are going to be pulled out. The 11-12 old gym, in the bleachers, they will be pulled out. The IMC, Quay Way, which for those folks that are not aware, that's like on the 11-12 side, it's like the quad. It's an outdoor area where they will be able to dine with picnic tables and other tables underneath the trees and all that kind of fun stuff. And then finally with in the classrooms with teacher permission. I will say that most of the teachers allow this currently on their lunch, allow kids to come in. So I cannot say for all teachers. The only thing is obviously they'll be responsible to bring their trash and put that in a large receptacle located outside the classroom. Mr. Strout also said that I was the chief negotiator for the WTEA. I would like to add, when we went to the teachers, the negotiating team, including Patty, and we asked the teachers to vote whether they wanted to go to this schedule. It was a resounding 92.5% of the teachers wanted to go to it. And the 7.5%, well, sorry, 7% were science teachers because we weren't sure about the labs and how it would cut in or how it would work. So if anything, that was my fault because I didn't have all the information at that point. And then there was just one no vote. I don't know why. But everyone's excited. The teachers are excited. Administration is excited. And I know the students will be excited as well. Thank you. I'm going to introduce Mr. Selby.
Thank you, Mr. Giverson. Good evening, everyone. Let's talk a little bit about supervision, because I'm sure that when you think about 2,300 students in the school and eating lunch at one time, there's probably some apprehension on your part when it comes to supervision of the kids during that unit lunch. I first want to tell you that each one of the high school administrators will be assigned to one of those areas that Mr. Giverson indicated. So on a daily basis, there'll be an administrator there. In addition to that, there'll be student supervisors that we currently have in our cafeterias. We have 8 of them for each one of our, 2 for each one of our cafeterias currently, so they will be dispersed to these areas where the students are going to eat. In addition to that, we have teachers will be assigned to those areas as a duty. We will utilize our SROs, which we have 2 of those. We have school security staff that we will utilize as well throughout that unit lunch period. So I too am very confident that supervision will not be an issue during that unit lunch. And I will also say that in the hallways throughout the unit lunch, I mentioned specific areas where people will be, correct? But during that unit lunch in the hallways, there will be staff that will be assigned, as you can consider them hall monitors as well. Okay, so supervision I know is a concern. It's a concern for us, and I think we're addressing it pretty well. Okay, so what are students going to do during that 56 unit lunch period? I am probably reiterating what you've already been told, but you know, obviously they're going to eat lunch. They're going to connect with friends, and you know, I've been in this school system since 1981, so I'm as old as some of these cinder blocks around here. And I will tell you that those next few bullets about connecting with friends, relaxing and decompressing are huge for these young people. I challenge you, and I've said this to a few people already tonight, I challenge you to think about your job that you're currently in. And just think if you were afforded an hour or 56 minutes where you could meet with a friend, relax, talk about anything you'd like, and just have a good time and honestly have a little fun with your friends. Obviously, completing schoolwork will be a great opportunity for your kids. Homework, read for pleasure. Anything they really like to do, they can utilize that time for. Teachers will have to afford some time for tutoring, okay, or where your kids can come in and see them, maybe meet in a small group with a teacher. They're called office hours. That's what we're calling them, okay? If your son or daughter's involved in a club or in athletics, might be an opportunity for them to get together. Study groups, as was mentioned before, it's just going to be a great opportunity. They can go see the counselors. There's a whole host of things that your kids can take advantage of. All right, so you're looking at this big facility and you're going, well, how in the world, Mr. Selby, are you going to cover this whole facility? Well, I can't do that. We can't do that. However, so we're going to implement some areas where your children cannot go. They're off limits. Okay? They obviously can't leave campus. They can't do that now. They're not permitted to leave campus. They can't, okay, unless they fall into that criteria where they're a senior in the study hall, which Mr. Stroud had alluded to. They can't eat and congregate in the hallways. Mr. Giverson gave you a list of places where they can eat. The expectation is they're going to eat there. They're not going to eat in the hallways. Now, if a student is grabbing something from a kiosk and is walking to an area and is, eating food, obviously that's going to be allowed. But the students are not going to be allowed to congregate. Okay? We have sections of the building where there's a second floor. The expectation is that's off limits unless your son or daughter is going to the second floor to see a teacher. Okay? And areas where there will be no supervision, like for instance here. They won't be allowed in here. On the 11-12 side, there's an auditorium. They wouldn't be allowed in there. So I just want to say to you, to the parents, and to any of the kids that are here, this is a great, obviously change, and change is hard. Sometimes it can be tough, but I'll tell you, the opportunities for your children are unbelievable, really unbelievable. So I'm going to turn it over back to Mrs. Tsoukalos.
All right, thank you, Mr. Selby. So I'm back. All right, so this township time that we have during the lunch period, as Mr. Giverson said earlier, him and I were a big part of the WTHS negotiations where we knew that we were going to have to help out. We have to help out with supervision. We can't have the 2,800 students walking around this building without having proper supervision. So one of the things we agreed to is that we will have one 28-minute block of a duty during that time. Then we have to, it says teachers must be available for at least one 28-minute tutor time during that township time for the lunches. Now again, as I said to you guys earlier, I teach math. I know it's going to be more than one 28-minute period. If a kid comes in for help or comes in to take a test, I can't say, oh, there we go, 28 minutes, you're out. They're going to need the same time to take their test as they do for the class. But I'm not going to be available every single day for the entire time because I'm going to need to be available for the supervision as well. So we sort of have to work together. So how are these students going to be able to know? We can decide with our lesson plans, and we can also decide we're going to put something, I'll show you in the next slide, a form that's going to be outside of our doors. They're going to come up with some kind of lamination form that we can put out because it'll change week to week. And let's be honest, if I want to, let's say I have a crazy week, I've got something to do, I may have a midterm to work on or papers I have to get caught up grading, I may not be available all 4 of the days, but let's say I want to pick 2 of them. Which 2 am I going to pick? Usually the ones that are going to be coming up on a large assessment. So I don't want to consistently have on day 2 that I'm always going to be available if, let's say, I'm testing on day 1 the following part of the cycle. So this is going to give us the flexibility to be able to help the students when we feel it's going to be best for our classes. So things like this will be posted outside of our door, and then we also have all kinds of electronic communication. So we're working on there's different ideas that I have actually spoken to Mr. Stroud about, giving us opportunities to communicate with the students, or we have things like Remind. You guys all know about the Remind apps. I know my children use it for all their classes as well. So we can communicate to the kids so they know, even if they have us in the afternoon, that I'll be available during that lunch period. So it's going to give them a lot of opportunities to work with us, and that way they're not running to a classroom like upstairs in F Hall, only to realize the teacher's not there. So this will all be, information will be given to the students. All right, so hopefully that'll be, an awesome part of this lunch. Okay, we're going to turn this back over to Mr. Stroud.
Thank you, Mrs. Tsoukalos. So there's only just a few more slides, and then we will certainly open it up for Q&A. We're in the home stretch. But the question certainly that comes up as an extension to some of the stuff that Mr. Selby talked about. But let me just go down and give you just a brief framework when we talk about the layers of supervision. Where will I be every day from 10:24 to 11:20, absent a mandatory meeting that my boss calls for me at Central, or in the rare event that I'm out sick? I will be in cafeteria CD. I'll be the administrator in that location, along with multiple teachers, a supervision assistant that is currently an assistant, and where will Mr. Selby be? Mr. Selby will be in the 910 gym. Where will Mr. Passante be? He'll be in the auxiliary gym. Where will Mrs. Costello be? She'll be in the IMC. Mr. Saya will be in Quay Way. Mr. Savarese will have cafeterias A and B. Mr. Cordner will be in the 11-12 new gym. Mr. Murphy will be in the 11-12 old gym. That's where administration will be during that time. The thing I'm most looking forward to, more than anything, for those of you that truly, truly know me, is connecting with kids, right? And so just like your job probably pulls you to your desk more than you'd like, and some of those interactions with humans gets lost, right? I know that I am guaranteed 56 minutes every day in cafeteria CD next year connecting with kids. And I'm really inspired by that. And that's some of the information that you hear from colleagues when you talk about it, how it's rejuvenated them in terms of a career from an administrative standpoint. But just so some further security measures, you may or may not know, and you probably are aware that we implemented, and I have to give credit to Mr. Saya, in the summer we wanted to tackle an issue, and that was concerns with issues that occur in the bathrooms and trying to better monitor bathroom usage and communicate as needed with parents of high-frequency bathroom users. Well, last week we joked administratively because we look at it, right? You can let your kids know because we went over 100,000 bathroom visits for the year last week. And we joked, should we play a song like, you're the 100,000th bathroom visitor? And in your mind, you might be going, oh my God, 100,000 bathroom visits? Well, if you break it down by student, it equates to 2.5 visits per week, not even an average of 1 per day. So it sounds like a lot, but in this big school, it's really not. My point in sharing this is, I could talk about the other data, forget about the number of times kids have gone to the bathroom, right? We're talking to the kids that have gone 7 times in one day. First and foremost, to see if they're okay, right? And secondly, to make sure that, we communicate with parents those concerns, but we're seeing a significant decrease in some of the issues that have occurred in the bathrooms that have led us to want to monitor them, all right? Whether it's a fight, vaping, right? Nobody's going to stand up here from where I sit and pretend like, oh, no, vaping doesn't go on in this school. But I can tell you we monitor it, and there have been, I have data on a significant reduction on some of those incidents. And so that's a good thing. So another example, so then, you learn something, right? So from that concept of the barcode scanning in and it working very, very effectively and efficiently for student safety purposes, we start to then use it for other purposes that we hadn't anticipated. So at homecoming, whereas before we had rosters and kids signed in and we highlighted them, and sometimes we made errors because we're human, right? And it takes forever for the kids to get in, and all they want to do is get to their homecoming. Well, this year we used it for that. And the kids' barcode scanned in, and the kids were happier because they were into their homecoming dance a little bit sooner, and we had more accurate data quicker on who was there, because we call home and tell you if your kid doesn't come to homecoming and you think they do. And just one more example, right? So I talked before about the kids that have the late arrival. Well, how are we going to know they're here? Because they're going to barcode scan in outside of the 11-12 auditorium. And then they're going to wait inside the 11-12 auditorium, supervised by a staff member, until it's time for them to move to their second or third period class for those kids that have a late arrival. All right, that's just, I just wanted to share that example. During the unit lunch, will kids, we actually, this is consumed all that we do, right? And that's a good thing because we're passionate about it, right? But we talked today, we're like, man, what's it going to be like? The bathrooms were, so okay, so we're going to shut down the second floor. Are we going to bring that hall lab monitor downstairs? We're going to leave the hall lab monitor up there. Thanks. We're really strategically thinking about these things. But as more we talk about it, kids aren't going to necessarily want to go to the bathroom during that unit lunch. Why? Because we know that some kids go to get out of class. They're going to be able to make some decisions personally and socially during that period that, but still, yes, they will have to scan into the bathroom. All right? That's answers that question. So when I talk about the increase in teacher supervision, that is a byproduct of taking 4 lunches, right? We make currently our priority on our duty charts that administration puts together. Where is our priority for staff supervision? It's in the cafeterias because that's the highest volume area of students, right? So we might have, in a given period, 4 or 5 teachers in a cafeteria right? If we have the ability to put as many in, all hands on deck. But now, when you pull the unit lunch into one spot, and now you add 8 additional bodies as on duty, right? We'll be on duty supervising the kids. Now you have opportunities, even more so than we currently have, for hall duties for staff, where they're out in the halls. We already did some strategic things this year. I'll give the credit to Mr. Selby on the 9-10 side, where we have a restriction room area, right, where kids sometimes get sent for a restriction room because it's just too much and they can't stay in class, right? And there's a person who's a paid staff member who monitors an AM person for restriction room. This is an assistant, and a PM person. Well, there are many days where we don't have kids that go to restriction room. Why? Because we got a lot of really good kids. And so what do we do with that person? That person comes out and is in the hallway if they're not being used. So we've done some things intentionally to really improve our supervision already, and we'll continue to analyze that and implement some of that stuff. Every year we do a cycle update on our cameras. We have approximately 150 cameras throughout the building, right? And so we realize where some of our areas are that we have to address. We don't have cameras in Quay Way right now. We'll have cameras in Quay Way on the first day of school next year, I guarantee you. And we'll have cameras in the auxiliary gym. We don't have cameras in the auxiliary gym at this moment. I probably shouldn't be telling you all of this, right? But I can tell you we have significant camera area throughout the building. Up until last year, we didn't have them in the pods, and now we do. Right, so this is a normal update that happens. And of course, now with some of our strategic planning for the higher volume students in these areas, those will obviously be the priority when we add cameras in this new cycle as we budget for that. So what supports will be in place for special needs students? Well, we have students, right? We have students that fall in all ranges of special needs, right? Some are special needs, and their needs require that they have an assistant that joins them during lunch and assists them, whether it's behaviorally or in some cases, some of our students need assistance with feeding, right? That won't change. IEPs will be written and students will be supported, those that need to be supported with staff during the unit lunch. But we also have counselors, SACs, administrators, all of the people that currently help our kids throughout the day. When we talk about allergies and a concern that some may have for severe nut allergies, for example, there will be a dedicated space to allow kids, if they choose, to go to eat in a nut-free zone. You don't have to have a nut allergy to eat there, right? So if my best friend has a nut allergy and they're really worried and they feel most comfortable eating there, then I might go and I might join them. Now, in speaking to our nurses, they will say that there's a lot of research that says that very few kids, even when given the opportunity, take advantage of that. But I share that only so that you know that that will be an option, all right? Certainly not a requirement, but an option. It's something for you to decide as a family if you want to tell your kid, you really need to eat there, if there were a nut allergy that's that severe. So during an emergency evacuation, right, the fire alarm goes off, and there's 2,300 kids in these various locations. Where do they go? Well, first, let me tell you that we have 45 minutes currently when there's passing where that could happen. It just happens in like 9 chunks of 5 minutes. Really, if you add the 2-minute grace period that we allow students that go wing to wing, it's almost an hour when kids are out and could be out. So it's something that we're already prepared for. It just might now look a little bit different, right? So where would those students go? Those students would go to the area where their last class was, right? And we'll practice this with them in the new schedule. It would be the same thing. So whatever class met in that third period, right? If you're 15, 20 minutes into the lunch and the fire alarm goes off, you exit the nearest door, get outside, and then you meet with your class there. We have a pretty detailed plan with all that, and two-way radios that are used, and we always make sure that we have all of our kids accounted for. But the third period class is where students would go during in the event of an evacuation. Restricted lunch. Oh my goodness. Okay, so right now we do, as one of our consequences for behavioral infractions, we do an after-school administrative detention, where kids go to detention from 2:20 to 3:20, and then they catch the late bus. And that might work, and it might reshape some behaviors, but talk to schools that take that freedom away from kids in the middle of the day when all of their friends and peers are available to hang out with, and the behavior changes a lot more quickly. We are eliminating after-school detention. It's gone. That detention happens in the middle of the day. For students that can't act properly and by way of our code of conduct would be assigned administrative detention this year, it'll be the same thing next year. Instead of 60 minutes, it'll be 56. They'll report to that room. There will be one dedicated on the 9-10 side, and there will be one dedicated on the 11-12 side. It will be the same room that's used for restriction room during the day, and students will need to report there immediately after their third period class. They will not use their phone. They will sit there, and their food that they order will be brought to them, and they probably will never want to come back. Significant game changer. Think about it. And when you talk to the other schools that report, and the slide before, a few slides back that talked about improved school culture and climate, well, schools will report and have hard data on the reduction in discipline in the new schedule. It's hard to imagine. Give them a little bit more freedom, and they act a little bit more mature, but it's actually a fact. And we joke, Mrs. Costello, who coordinates all of our proms, we always joke when our kids come out to the proms, man, they clean up well. When you set the expectation here, our kids rise to the challenge. But if they fall, we'll hold them accountable. Restricted lunch will be in play next year. Well, how will the kids be prepared to adjust? Well, this is really the first structured presentation for parents and for students, and it's great to see some of our students here. Hi, Emma. It's great to, but we'll also be going into the classrooms, right, to meet in smaller groups with our kids. On February 3rd, administration, members of our administrative team and some members of our, on the intimate side of our scheduling committee will be going into every freshman social studies class, doing a similar presentation a little bit more quickly, and Q&A for kids. On February 4th, we'll do the same in sophomore classrooms, and on February 5th, we'll do the same in junior social studies classrooms. I'll remind you once again that I have this similar presentation scheduled for Wednesday, February 26th, and if I need to schedule another one, I can. I love to talk about this because it's my passion. I'm planning larger grade level assemblies for 8th graders in March. Part of the reason why we're not doing the intimate work with the 8th graders is because there's not going to be a change for them. This will be all they know. So it's not that we're not going to give them the same information, but there won't be some of that relearning that our current freshmen and sophomores and juniors will have to go through, because it will be very different for them in a good way. Working currently with a couple of our classrooms for a variety of projects so that the kids are involved. One of them in particular, Mrs. Kirsten Smith, she teaches animation. She's one of our art teachers, teaches animation, and I've met with that class a couple of times, and they're working, or just once really in detail, but some back and forth dialogue. They're creating short animated clips that we're going to start to roll out every Wednesday, Friday, which is when we do our Wake Up Township show, to start to put reminders out there for the critical information. So for example, right, these animated clips that'll be maybe 30 seconds, quick attention grabbing, built into the show, might be a precursor reminder for students as to where you can eat, right? Not that we're going to just tell them once, but just to start to really plant that seed in the minds of our kids. And then, of course, at the start of the year, similar to how we do now, grade level assemblies. And, also, Mrs. Sukalis maybe not talked about other things we're exploring. Some schools have an app. Yes, there's an app for that. And a kid can open their phone, and I'm not going to say that we're there yet, but it's something we're absolutely exploring, where I can see where I'm supposed to be right now. And the teachers joked, and they said, well, we need that for us too. And I said, yeah, I agree. It's going to be an adjustment for all of us. But after 2 weeks, it'll be like we've always done it, and we'll all adjust. And I'm certain that very few will want to go back. I'm done speaking at you. I'm looking forward to speaking with you. Mr. Bollendorf's going to come back up here, and he and I will field and tag team and answer questions. I encourage you not to be shy. We have 2 mics. You're free to go. I'll stay as long as I need to. But I'll also say, for those of you that may not know me, and if you're not comfortable asking a question in public, that's okay. My email is jstrout@wtps.org. I'm at extension 7412 at the high school. I'd love to hear from you, especially if you feel like there's something you weren't comfortable, whether it's a private question you just don't want to ask in a large group. Let's have that dialogue. Okay.
Before we start with questions, just a couple of clarifying comments as we're going through the slides that I want to just make sure are clear. I made some notes while I was watching. First of all, for the seniors to take advantage of either coming in late or leaving early, as is the custom and tradition, transportation is not provided. Those students would have to be able to drive themselves to and from. That's very critical. While I'm on the subject of senior privilege, the one thing I don't think that was made clear was that currently right now, not all of our seniors have the ability to take advantage of senior privilege. Currently right now, all of our seniors, unless they're in a certified co-op program, which there are very few, are here for at least 6 periods a day. It is those seniors that are fortunate enough to get 6 straight classes, a lunch 7th period, and then a study hall 8th period that have the benefit of being able to leave super early, and those that perhaps have 6 periods with their lunch before 7th period that have an 8th period study hall. Many of our students are taking courses that may only meet 8th period and thereby cannot take advantage of senior privilege. So senior privilege is not a privilege for all seniors currently. In this new schedule, every senior will be able to benefit from an opportunity to leave early or to come in late, and that makes it a true senior privilege. Clarifying graduation credits. Your current seniors and current juniors will continue to only need 120 credits to graduate. Starting with the sophomores, our current sophomores, they'll need 130. And follow the math because we're giving them a 5-credit buffer. Right now, students who take 7 classes a day or year, all right, can take 140 credits during that time. 140, all right? Under the new schedule, students will actually be able to take, if they take 4 years of a lab science, 159 credits if they take advantage of the time that they have, of which they're only going to need 130. And where do those extra 4 come from? Well, because our phys eds will no longer be linked to lab science. All right, lab science will be a standalone, and that's a huge advantage because now students who are seriously interested in the sciences as a career will be able to take more than 1 lab science in a year. Currently they can, but they have to give up a whole class to be able to do it. It has to punch into a study hall. So they're forced to take a study hall that they may not want to take in order to take a second lab. Now they will not need to do that. That's a huge game changer and an advantage to our kids. Concern about the overall minutes per class and this calculation of 400 minutes, particularly in advance of AP test. Well, I think that the number comes for the whole year, not before May. It's also important to note that in this new schedule, all right, students will have the opportunity through the Lunch and Learn to meet with their teachers in ways that they never met with them before. And calculating the maximum number of opportunities that they could actually meet with those teachers in a 4-day cycle could actually increase their exposure to instruction with those teachers if our students actually take advantage of it. And there are other creative ways that we're discussing right now that I don't want to go into because I know how things travel around town, all right, that we could increase some minutes beforehand. But we're very much aware of that. But we believe it's the quality of the instruction that they're going to get during that time. Right now, your kids there's 9 passing times a day. They spend 45 minutes a day passing from one class to the other. And 2 minutes are built in for those kids traveling from wing to wing. We're reducing passing to 4 times a day. 4 times. That's where all the minutes are coming to do all these other things that we need to do. We're eliminating wasteful time and maximizing instructional time. I want to emphasize the academy structure. As you know, we started 5 career academies this year. Next year, we're launching a medical professionals career academy. Our seniors are going to be able to take tremendous advantage of apprenticeship opportunities, starting their college career off by going to Gloucester County College or Camden County College and getting credits under their belt. And students that fall into those option 2 areas, which are now going to be more prevalent and available to our kids like never before, could actually get out of school half a day every day their senior year. That currently does not exist for our kids. They cannot do that in the current schedule that we have. After-school activities. I know there's been some talk that there's no longer going to be after-school activities. I don't even know where some of this stuff comes from. There will continue to be all activities, but now kids will have an opportunity to not only come together after school, but during school, which means those kids who can't avail themselves to activities because they got to go home and babysit their little brothers and sisters, or they've got to go to work, or they've got to do whatever it is that they have to do because of their own situations, will now also be able to engage and be involved in things because they don't necessarily have to always come after school. That's huge. And hold on, one more. Start and end times. I know this is a big conversation piece as well. All right, so if we're going to expand the length of the high school day, we have our own transportation service. It works in 4 cycles. So obviously there's going to have to be a ripple effect with regards to the start and end times for the other levels. All right, so there are options. None of this is in stone yet. I did share some information with some local folks, and I should have known better. It's out like it's gospel. It's in draft form. It doesn't exist. We're trying to minimize that time. I think at a minimum, you'll see a change in start and end times by about 5 minutes in order to be able to accommodate the needs of the schedule and make that work. So there's still debate as to who moves where and in what direction, but none of it is in stone. And when it is, that'll be shared out with the community.